And welcome back. In Those Shoes, a podcast by LHI. I'm your co-host, James Westwood, principal talent partner here at LHI. And I'm joined today by somebody who, and I say this every time, but I'm very fortunate to have been involved in this young man's journey from inception. Our very own Jersey boy, Brian Zinco. Before we get going, Brian or Zinco, what we're going to refer you as? Zinco, Brian, sounds weird to call you Brian, but
Hey, so whatever makes you happier. Zinco's good
okay.
by me for today.
Okay, Zinco it is then. Can you make a quick introduction to yourself, mate?
Yeah, absolutely. So name's Brian Zinco. Currently one of the VPs of our SciPro brand and run our contract solutions division right now. Been with LHI for about 4.5 years, pushing on 5 in the blink of an eye. And it's been a great journey up to this point, but hope that serves well.
It does. And as I said, very excited to lift the bonnet of this conversation because not only do you have a unique insight of going through growing up with LHI, right, in many respects, but also you joined at a pivotal moment in everyone's life, right, in terms of COVID. So I'm really interested to lift that experience of yours and showcase what that was like. But also, and as you referenced there in the contract world now, previously in the perm world, and I know at the moment you're balancing a bit of both, that is a unique insight because naturally if I can speak freely, it's normally the other way around. People go from contract into perm. So hopefully we can lift some nuggets from this conversation. So we start this podcast, Zinco, with an introduction to how you got into this crazy world and this industry that we call recruitment or staffing. So are you able to kind of give us an entry point of, I guess, the mindset of going into recruitment or perhaps sales and what it was about LHI at the time that, again, as a graduate navigating that world of starting your professional career, how you landed at LHI?
Yeah, absolutely. So might be a bit of a long-winded answer for you, but I think it dates back to college. So at school, I was a psychology major. Quickly in college, I knew going back to school and really pursuing psychology probably wasn't going to be an area for me. Even at a young age, I knew I was going to be paying off my student loans and money was quite important. So about my junior year of college, still wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do with my life. And then a couple things fell into my lap. So first, started doing like an internal recruitment, HR type of internship at UPS, where I was basically building out and staffing all their warehouses. And,
Yeah.
that was a good experience because, it taught me how to work with senior stakeholders in the HR division at UPS. But, what I quickly realized was that I I didn't have that extra motivation because regardless of how well I did and how many people I was bringing into the team, there was no additional reward for me. And I didn't know it at the time. I started to realize probably 6 months later when I started to do a bit of sales. And my buddy's dad, my best friend's dad, owns his own real estate brokerage. And over my winter, summer breaks, and spring breaks, I would be going into the office driving from Monmouth County, New Jersey, all the way up to Brooklyn. So about figure an hour and a half each way every
Humble
single day.
beginnings.
Humble beginnings. And, in that time, our job was to basically go out and find leads for his dad to go invest into rental or into new properties. So looking at homes and list pendants, walking around areas that were up and coming, just finding people who might be looking to sell houses. And to be honest, in those, I don't know, 9 months or so, I didn't achieve anything, but that's where I fell in love with the chase of sales and starting to build rapport with people. And, I realized that while maybe I didn't land anything yet, my friend's dad gave me a lot of feedback and said, "Hey, I think sales is going to be a real opportunity for you." And when I started to apply to jobs after those experiences, I thought, okay, I definitely want to be in a position where I could control my own destiny and make my own money. And I knew I liked the interpersonal side of what I was doing from a talent acquisition perspective at UPS. So I started to apply to jobs, a blend of, HR talent roles. And then, honestly, I was just applying on LinkedIn and I came across LHI and I said, oh, what's this company? And started to look into them a bit more. And really what initially caught my eye was the success of such a young company and the story of Tom Glanfield, how he launched this business pretty much from his apartment or loft, whatever you might call it, depending
Yeah.
on where you're living. And that was inspiring to me. And then, I got an interview, had a call with HR at first, went well. And then really what got me is when I started to be meeting with the actual leaders of potential managers at the time. And I think there was a few things that stood out to me. One, I got challenged quite a bit based on my commute, and I was going to be commuting from central New Jersey to
Okay.
Manhattan, didn't have the funds to live at the time. And the fact that I was pushed a little bit, that's usually what brings the best out of me because I have that let me prove you wrong type of
Okay.
mindset and
And where does
attitudes.
that come from?
Oh man, that's probably just from
It's too deep.
tons of failure playing sports my whole life, people
Okay.
telling me I might not be good enough for something or I might not be able to achieve something. It just naturally has put that chip on my shoulder. And then lastly, the people that I was meeting were all, I don't know, maybe 26 to 28-year olds who have already had a super successful career. And when I was looking forward into my life, I thought, I want to be in that position in, 4 to 5 years time. And then the rest is history.
Interesting. Fantastic insight, first and foremost. I think what's unique about that for me is that you've joined the dots very quickly there of something that you enjoyed or knew you were good at in relation to that stakeholder engagement, working, in that HR talent role, but then taking advice from other people around, the sales aspect and then joining the two together. Because I think sometimes we see, certainly on the grad hiring, which I know you're involved in a lot, and we use you a lot on that front, is that people want to get into it because they want to help people, and I'm not suggesting that that's not the case for you, but certainly they don't get into it for the money aspect or the financial part of it. But that seemed to resonate with you very quickly, and whilst you didn't see the success, you backed yourself, which is fascinating. So the entry point into LHI, as we referenced earlier, March of 2020, COVID
Oh,
is
yeah, oh, God.
March or COVID of 2020. So you might have had a month or two before that kicked off. So I'm assuming you had an entry point. I'll always remember the conversation, which was one of probably the first 2 weeks into my job, was we need to call this graduate up, and he's been offered a role with Lawrence Harvey, which is our technology brand, but the market's tanked. And there's just we haven't got room to hire him. So you need to persuade this guy. Don't know who he is, pick up the phone, and all I remember is thinking, this guy sounds like he's on The Sopranos. Like, who is this guy? And I know you were nervous about it at the time. So help us understand the concept of going into SciPro and that reality of starting in a job where you may have had a couple of weeks, maybe a month or two in an office, and then going fully remote.
Yeah, no, I mean it's crazy to think back on that, and it was less than 5 years ago. But yeah, I mean I was set to start actually and I did start in August of
Okay.
2020, and then carried on through there. But yeah, the after the interview process, I was initially supposed to be joining under Mariano in the
Yeah.
LH group, which I was super excited about. Accepted this job probably in December of 2019, so I thought, hey, have it all figured out, have a job going into after graduation. And then COVID hit. And, there was those months from probably May to July where I was just working out every day, didn't have much to do with my life. And that was my hobby. And I was looking forward to starting at LHI. Then the conversation that you're referencing, you're right. I was definitely a bit nervous. So you gave me the call mid workout. I'll never forget it. I was dripping sweat. I saw a call from a 646 number. So I said, has to be someone from LHI. And, on that call, I thought you were probably going to break bad news to me and saying, hey, COVID hit. We're not going to be able to bring you on anymore. And that was what I was expecting when I answered the phone. But, in reality, I got the best news I could have asked for, not to shade Mariano, because I'm sure we would have worked well together. But when you let me know that there was an opportunity on SciPro who was absolutely smashing it at the time with a team of 5 or 6 heads, I knew that's the place where I wanted to be deep down the entire process. And I love to give her a little bit of shame for it, but SciPro is actually the brand that I wanted. And Kat Capel, who later became my manager at one point, and a dear friend of mine, was the only manager who rejected me in the interview process.
Love
So
that.
once you gave me that opportunity, I thought, thought, this is exactly where I want to be. Can't wait to hit the ground running with SciPro. And yeah, I think that's the best decision that, either the business made, but also just the way that the cookie crumbled at points, because I'm passionate about the field. And I thought, this is something where, yes, I could, make an impact and place people who are making a significant difference in the world, but also I knew that I would be mentally stimulated in life science recruitment, which was a big
Sure.
driver for me initially.
And interesting there that you referenced that cat who, uh, as you said, didn't feel like you were going to be the right fit. That's triggered something that you referenced earlier about proving someone wrong, right? So, sometimes it's meant to be, right? And the common denominator there in not just choosing LHI, but the brand you referenced Mariano, is that you're choosing the people, right? And you're putting trust in. You're not getting necessarily caught up on, yes, you referenced the early success, but you're not getting caught up on the salary or anything like that. It's the people that are in the organization that have appealed to you and you're trusting them, which clearly has been a great decision by the business. I'll play a small part in that somehow, I think, or take a claim of that for sure. But yeah, fantastic, great insight there, mate. So the first I say the first 6 to 12 months in the role, you either realize this isn't for me, what have I done? Or it's a duck to water moment and I should have been doing this. Well, I know you couldn't have done it any sooner, but some people get into it late like myself. So what was that first 6, 12 months like for you? And again, referencing the fact that I know when you joined, I think you were putting your hand up and like, I want to be in office as soon as I can. But what was that period like? Because, going back to that, I remember, what it was like in the epicenter of the world at one point, right? In terms of the pandemic. So help us understand how you're developing your skill set, because a lot of people rely on being in office with a lot of people, listening to people on the phones. You perhaps didn't get all of that, right? And obviously jumping into life sciences when your headspace is tech and then going into life sciences. Help us understand that first 6 to 12 months and how you navigated through everything that's going on outside you and trying to focus it on and making a career for yourself.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and maybe I try to black out those times a little bit,
Yeah,
but
I think we all do,
um,
mate.
in reality, those first maybe 6 to 9 months were really critical for, I think, shaping who I am and who I can be in this life. So if I'm thinking about the start, I was living at my parents' house in central New Jersey again. I was commuting in every day, so I came in the office 5 days a week. Granted, there wasn't a ton of people there, but I knew this was a job. You get what you put into it, and I was leaving my parents' house at, I don't know, 4:30, 4:45 a.m. every day, hopping on the bus by 5:15, getting in at 7, work until 7, getting home at 9, and rinse and repeating, doing that cycle
Yeah,
day in and day out. And if I think about my first month or two, I remember going through trainings and then starting to get on the phones, people telling me, wow, like you're going to be the next big thing. You're going to be one of the fastest promotions ever. And, got into my head a little bit. I remember I used to tell my dad, hey, like I'm crushing it. I'm going to be so successful in this job, when, in reality, that's not how things ended up panning out.
mm,
So if I'm to fast forward a bit, I don't think I did a deal until March of 2020. So
okay,
quite a bit of time, had about 8 or 9 rejected offers with COVID, roles going on hold because companies just weren't sure
sure.
about their ability to hire or budget, when I thought, hey, these might be sure shots. I think through that time, something that I really benefited from was all the leaders who were accessible to me. So I took it in my own hands. I'm definitely hard on myself, and I was beating myself up about some of the failures that I was going through, but I knew deep down that I could get this done. So I started to speak with all the senior leaders, from ranging from Mike Giorgio to Mike Bott when I was a fresh grad, getting their perspective on how I could improve, reaching out to Sam K, learning how to do business development, and really just picking the brains of the best in the industry. But to your earlier point, I definitely had that day where I thought, you know what, maybe recruitment isn't for me. And I remembered when I was interviewing, all the interviewers told me I might come across that time. And I remembered I was like scoffing or laughing at that. at that comics. I said, no way this will happen to me. But there was a point right before the holidays in December. I thought for sure I was going to have an accepted offer, and this was going to be it. I'd go into the new year finally figuring out recruitment. Guy came back and told me the commute was too far for him and his wife, and he wasn't going to be able to move forward with the opportunity. And that crushed me. But I think what was even tougher right after is that I got a calendar invite from Mike Giorgio, who at the time was our office leader, and it was just labeled desk catch up. And, in my head, deep down, I was like, uh-oh, here we go. I get fired from my first job in, under half a year. I couldn't do this and started to spiral a little bit. But the next day when I met with Georgie, it actually was quite the opposite. And it was so encouraging to the point where he told me the business back to me. All the feedback he was hearing about me was incredible. My activities all pointing in the right direction, but obviously I haven't seen the revenue come in yet. And the whole conversation was just about what could the business do more of for me and what could they do to put me in a position to succeed. And that's something that I think really stuck with me and probably a major reason why I ended up staying at LHI, because right after that, I remembered going outside and calling my dad, who's definitely a big influence on me, and saying, I don't think I could do this anymore. I can't handle this commute. I'm not seeing any success. I'm not making any money. Have all these rejected offers, and then told him about the conversation with Mike Giorgio. And then, really what my dad said to me and stuck with me was that, I've been doubted my entire life and nothing's ever come easy to me. And anytime the odds have been stacked against me, that I've always found a way to overcome it. But, he mentioned you're in your first job, you haven't done anything yet, and you have someone super senior in the business encouraging you and really wanting to give you the support. People look their whole careers for a company that's going to back you and believe in you. So why don't you go into the new year, take a breath, believe in yourself, and if it's really not for you after the next 3 to 6 months, then maybe you could think about looking outside. But moving into the following year, that's simply all I did. I stopped doubting or listening to any doubts, comparing myself to others, and I said, I'm going to give this a real go and I'm going to be confident about it. And then that's really where I saw the lift off and take off, and haven't looked back since.
Well, firstly, thank you, Mr. Zinco, for that pearls of wisdom that he gave you there. And I couldn't agree more with you. But I think a common trend with that is that you're almost taking it personal, right? That you are out to, prove to yourself, but prove to any doubters, which it sounds like you hadn't. Well, and I know that you never had any in the business. But you're taking it upon yourself, which I think, everyone can talk about that recruitment can be this vehicle to great things, but it will only be that if you're willing to sacrifice things, if you're willing to put yourself outside your comfort zone. And I asked for a bit of feedback from Kev Cooley, which you'll like this. I won't read it all because I don't know if we'll fit your head on the screen, but he references that fundamentally you take time in everything that you do. And there's definitely a compliment there to the business and allowing you that time. But, to what you're referencing in terms of those commutes, I remember trying to beat you in, and I was only 10 minutes away in Dumbo, trying to beat you in first thing in the morning. But I remember you referencing that you listened to podcasts on the way in. Again, I know that you were reaching out proactively, and I think that is a key piece of advice for anyone who's early on in their career or transitioning into the industry. Utilize the people that are around you, and clearly that's put you in great stead going forward, which again we'll fast forward a little bit to building and shaping yourself as an expert in the tech ops space, right? Which was what you built your career on for the most part, right? Help us understand that part, because it's one thing not seeing some success, getting some compliments and being in a position where like, yeah, I can believe in myself. And that's hard to get to first and foremost in this industry. But to then flourish and to get into a position where you are signing terms with the top 10 pharma, that you are becoming this person that, from what I understand, has inbound business and people are go to. How do you get to that point? Kev references that you took your time to learn the market. You were very quick to pick up and spot the commercial dots, which you were demonstrating before you're even in recruitment. Help us understand maybe some words of wisdom to someone who's trying to build that niche or trying to build something out, how you got to that point. Because if you're able to reference what the peak was in terms of your head count of your team, but also the success, around that point?
Yeah, I think initially, when I look back on my struggles in my first 6 to 9 months, granted, I didn't have success in terms of revenue, but I was starting to build a network and really understand the space. My initial manager was awesome with that and really had me prioritize learning something every single call, every single week, coming away with something. Because at first, it was really just, a bunch of things I had no idea what people were talking about. But I started to get comfortable being uncomfortable and not knowing what I was saying, asking senior talent, what does this mean? Or could you tell me a bit more about this process? And then naturally I got to a point where I could hear what they were saying and I would almost regurgitate it back to candidates and clients to make sure that I knew what I was hearing was actually
Mm,
the correct answer. And I think that was critical for me to learn a space. I also doubled down, not just a tech ops niche, but probably for the first 3 years, I only worked across cell therapies, gene therapies, and other types of genetic medicine. So it was a super niche talent space
right.
where I have this crazy memory at points where I could just like see a name and sometimes know they work at this company. I just had everyone mapped out in my head and everyone was probably reached out to me one way or another. And then when the market started to turn a bit, COVID kind of, passed its way. I was starting to consistently get to the bell, generate revenue. The next was then being able to take that and use it as my own business development. Started to pull a couple clients. In that year, I went from a C1 to a C3. Then I had the opportunity moving into the following year to be a young manager and head up the tech ops organization. Started off with two reports, hired them at the exact same time, trained them just the way that I was trained, and they saw massive success. And then later on that year, I hired another two at the same time, and I really just had them built out across the entire drug development lifecycle for tech ops and a specialist in each core area. And from there, we just had a clear go-to-market. We knew what we were doing, the types of candidates that we were working with, which just made the business development front much easier. And then what I enjoyed to do was work in those more senior types of positions and really using that as my business development and building a relationship with someone as opposed to just being an email behind a screen and not actually understanding the person, because I think that's super important when you're doing business. You have to like one another and someone has to know that you're going to do right by them. And I think that's what really enabled me to have a book of business and maybe to do well in times when others were struggling was all because that relationship focus.
Wow, that's a lot, and that I think in itself will definitely cap that and send that out as a snapshot for people to understand, because that's stuff that people 5, 6 years in don't aren't doing or don't know. So it's incredible that you have that skill set, and yeah, it's an impressive for a very young man. And clearly we had unearthed, and where you go in this business is for everyone to be excited about. So you get to the point of, I don't want to use the word completing recruitment, but it sounds like, for a lot of people, they will get comfortable in that position, right? And maybe arguably too comfortable in the position of, "Well, I've got a good team, they're billing clearly," and we were tapping into this younger you now, which I'll talk about later. But you're building people, you're seeing success in those people in terms of developing those, getting them promoted. They potentially are in and around the area of maybe taking on their own team, which is where every manager and leader wants to be. So how does this opportunity of going into contract come about? And that for a lot of people is, that seems a bit too much for me," or "It's not really in my wheel. It's not really something that I want to get involved in." How does that come about? And what do you pull from, going deep here? What do you pull from to say, "Do you know what? Yeah, I do want to take that on." Kev references it again, that you're constantly pushing yourself to want to better yourself personally and professionally. So help us understand that situation. How did it come about, and what was your thought process, and to taking on that challenge?
Yeah, and I think it kind of stems back to previous life experiences. And to your point, I was flying. My team was probably on pace to be a team of the year before I made the move if I didn't switch mid-year.
Hmm.
And I knew that we could do that pretty consistently. But thinking about myself, I've always performed when I'm unsure and I have a little bit of internal, I don't want to say stress in like a negative connotation, but when I use stress as a positive for
Hmm.
myself to say, hey, can you do this or is this possible? That's where I find myself getting into the really good stuff of life and that fulfillment and just picking up a new skill. So I think with my previous role, it was really hard for me because I loved the team I managed. We had such a great culture. Everyone was doing well, but I knew deep down, and probably for a few months, even before the idea was pitched to me, that I needed to do not necessarily something entirely new, but I needed a challenge because otherwise I'm not going to be at my best. And that's just came to knowing who I was and starting to figure myself out a bit more as I got older. So I had that in the back of my head. And then um, maybe early 2023, Mike Giorgio pitched the idea to me of moving into contracts, and there's a couple reasons for it. He thought my skill set would transfer nicely to it, but really a big component was that the business with our EOT, a huge thing that our investors want to see is a contract booked being up and running. It's forecastable, repeatable revenue. It's easy to know how much we're going to be invoicing from a month to month perspective. And it's just something that we weren't quite able to scale prior. I think, there's a lot of hires who were made and probably not right for the business who didn't make it too long. So they thought, why not back me to do it? And, then again, I still wasn't sure, but they gave me the time to really think about it and come up with a lot of questions. And then it came to that point maybe in April or May of 23 where I said, you know what? I'm really scared to do this. I'm really nervous to do it. And that probably means that I should step into this position.
Nice. I always remember, just to your point on stress, I always remember Mike Bott saying that pressure is a privilege. And it clearly resonates there, right? That if you're not sure, then you should do it, right? And so help me understand, and for those listening, help us understand how you how do you switch your skill set when Mike's talking about there's a lot of transferable skills. Help us understand not necessarily the markets that you're working in, but just the mechanics of how different perm is to contract, or I should use the word contingent to temp, right? But what are the main differences and what were the challenges you foresaw in, well, since you've been in this role, and how have you made it a success? Because clearly, I talk to candidates all the time about the success we're having, not just on the perm side in life sciences at the moment, but also the growth in contract. I think is up 34% from the last 6 months. So help us understand that how you transitioned the difficulties or challenges that you faced and the successes that you've seen off the back of that.
Great question. I think the challenges at first were just knowing what it was. Like to me, contract was just this big, scary side of recruitment that if you're a perm recruiter, you don't really worry about or know
Yeah,
anything about. So I think I was probably a little bit overwhelmed to start with just like the compliance behind it, understanding like W-2s versus 1099s, when they might make sense for certain clients in certain situations, and then figuring out how much people cost. Because if I look back to my perm days, I knew how much every position should be
yeah,
paying, base, bonus, equity, give or take within a few thousand. When I moved into this, I had no idea because it could all fluctuate depending on hours, length of contract, and so many little
sure,
factors. I think once I started to figure that part out by speaking with a lot of candidates and contractors, consultants, like long-term connections that I had across the industry at senior levels, just picking their brain on the space, I started to realize it's really, and some people will probably disagree with me, but I don't really think it's that different. At the end of the day, recruitment's recruitment. I think contract played to my strengths because it's more relationship based and there is no transactions behind it because you really have to understand a business. You have to know your current contractors, when they might be finishing. You might need to have a whole bench of folks to understand everything about them when their projects finish. And I think where I really found a sweet spot is just the creativity of contract and being able to pitch different types of solutions or contractors or consultants to clients that I would never have the opportunity to do on perm.
sure.
And I think just diving even deeper with the client because sometimes there's not even a role that you could think of, but just through conversation, going over their business and what they're working on, you might find actually a consultant is going to make sense for you because they could help you achieve X in, a finite period of time where you could avoid these layoffs that we've seen. And I think, selfishly, it's been a tough, year and a half or two globally on the job market. But I think with that in mind, companies, especially in life sciences, have probably been more open to using contractors and consultants once you could get past that initial stigma. Because for whatever reason in the US, I found that people do have a stigma to contractors and consultants at points. And it's about that education process of how they're adding value to a business and how they are high impact and high efficient. And they could be just as good, if not better, than FTEs that you have on your group because they are so specialist in what they do. So once I started to figure that out, which did take some time, right? I don't think I really got into a comfortable spot until maybe 6, 7 months ago, maybe 8 months ago, where I felt like, okay, I have a grasp on this. Now, how could I really look and build? Which is why I think, the last 6 to 8 months, my team has really started to take off because I felt like I could speak the language. I know what we're doing, and I know how to make sense of this.
Yeah, nice. I think there's something that I referenced that we call ourselves recruitment consultants, right? But actually, in most businesses, how often can you actually consult? And I think the word that resonates there in what you've just talked about is partnership. You're working with a client or a high level candidate. How can you partner with them to find the right solution? I think is another word to use, right? I'm throwing buzzwords around here, but fundamentally,
Sound like a
that's where any
recruiter.
yeah, but that's the reality, right? That if you can get to that position where you can, as a business, or have individuals that are truly partnering, that are trying to provide solutions to a business, that's where you're going to see the successes. And for everyone to see in terms of Cypro New York, Cypro globally, and I think the wider picture of LHI, that's where, in my opinion, becomes a bit of a pitch here, but that's where we're coming into our own, turning into that talent solutions is providing a different an environment for recruiters, but also the services that you can provide, which creates more opportunities for sure. So just we talked about earlier about your tech ops leadership experience, and now obviously we're seeing the fruits of that on the contract side. Referencing Nicole, who obviously you inherited, somebody who's obviously flying at the moment, and Ben who's joined recently. The concept and the reason I talk about these is because the big philosophy we have in our business is the younger you, and as a byproduct that the future you. The younger you, as we've talked about many times on this podcast, and what this is all about, is about putting yourself in the shoes of Zinco when he was in his gym, and Westwood calls him in and says, "I want you to take this opportunity, and not the one that you were asked to do." And that journey that you've elegantly gone through. What does the future you mean to you, Zinco? What does it mean to you, and who, without mentioning too many people, who do you pull from that has helped shaped who you are to this day? I know we've got to wrap this up shortly because you've got a trip to Boston to go and see some clients, but that young you, what does it mean to you, and how do you, and who's attributed to it? This is a multi question here, but how do you play that part for those people that are in your team now?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, also a great philosophy. I think,
I'm on a
initially what
roll
it
here. That's three
yeah,
three
you
great
you you
questions.
you you are, Jimmy. Yeah, you should make a career out of podcasting. I think you'd be on the top charts of Spotify.
Thank you,
But
mate.
I think really what it means to me is just making the job easier for everyone that's coming through the business after you. And there was a few key influences for me when I was up and coming. People like Kat Capel, people like, Mariano, people like Sam K. And then I think really, not to toot his own horn too much, but Mike Giorgio is just inspiring to me. He was in every single day, despite being, the office leader, then the MD at one point, same time, same work ethic, and he was just leading by example. And I felt like I wanted to model that for him, whether he knew what he was doing or not. That's him showcasing what this job could be, and then the work that he was still doing to do it really pushed me to motivate myself to keep going down that track. But I think as I started to manage a team, I thought about good managers, great coaches, leaders, whoever may have been in my life. And I think where I always excelled is the ones who got to know me and really used that as like the major driver on what I needed. So I took that as a manager to think like every individual has their own needs, right? You're not going to be able to manage everyone the same way. Some people might need you to be a bit more hands-on to get to X point in their life. Others might need you to take a back seat and just help them from a support perspective. But I think it comes down to knowing your team, what they want out of the job, what they want out of outside of the job in life, and then your job as a manager and to really embody the younger you is how could you get them there and how could you make it easier for them on that journey? Because there might be some things that one person wants, another has no interest in. It's just how could you put them in a position to get there, I think is what it's all about.
Nice. Couldn't have said it better myself. So, want to wrap up a little bit just on New York and the future of Zinco within LHI. So, again, referencing joining in COVID, we were actually in floor 14, right? I think it was in the
Floor
same
14.
building. There we go. There's crazy memories have been made there. Um, Starting there and going on the journey, I think it's fair to say that period of time between 2020 and where we are today, the New York business has been on a roller coaster, right? And most of it in an upward trajectory, right? And I think the any downturn is more so because of what the industry faced, right? But the the journey that you went on from, do you remember how many people were in the office? I think it was about maybe 65, maybe head count, roughly around that
Yeah.
number, to upper ends of 120, I think maybe at one point. And the for me, a key sign of a good business, and I talk about this, is that the culture ever evolves, right? And should never stand still. And a big part of that is the people that join the business and play their part in changing that culture and evolving it. Help us understand. Jim talks about this stardust that LHI has, and fundamentally, it comes from good humans that we hire. Um, and obviously some of the philosophies that are intertwined in that, the future you and the younger you especially. But help us understand that journey that you've went on through the New York office and a bit more of an insight to what it's like to be in an office of, I think, about 75 sales heads, not including operations. What was that journey like? And living in I don't know if you ever grew up wanting to be in the big city, but what was that like in that 4-year, 5-year journey, and what is it like at the moment in the New York business?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I remember, the first year or so, I think we are even less than 60, 65 heads, probably
Mm,
closer to the 40, 45
mm.
number. And I think naturally we were just a super, super close-knit office where there was, everyone was colleagues, but we were really friends deep down. And I think, one, I remember my college friends and home friends saying, why do you always hang out with your colleagues? And I think it was just because we all liked each other so much and we all got on so well. But I think culturally, how that, impacted the office for quite a bit of time was that even when times were tough, or even if you're doing well, there was always someone rooting for you or asking about you and really in your corner. When I wasn't billing, like someone who really stands out to me is Charlie Walker. We barely even knew each other at the time. And now I'd say we're pretty good friends and, have been friends for quite a bit of time. But when I was struggling, he was always checking in on me. And I think that was just because of the culture that we had at the time. And he was like the first person that came over to me for my first deal. And like those are the memories that you don't forget. And that stays with you, right? And you want to do that for other people. So even when we grew quite a bit, I think sure that the culture may have changed a little bit, had a lot of new managers managing, but I think that ethos of caring about the person next to you and taking the time to support them never change within the business. And I think that's something that we've stuck true to and probably doubled down on in the last year and a half or so when times were tough. It wasn't just about the numbers at points, it's about the person and supporting them because there's times where that sometimes all someone needs is that support to really see performance. So I think that's one thing that's never changed. And fast forwarding to now, I think we're, probably in the middle of our peak and then, that 45 number. So I think to your point, around 75 heads across the business. And we have a really good balance of hard work, high performing culture, people supporting one another, but also having like fun as well, and genuine fun and enjoying each other's presence, which is when we're operating in that manner, I don't think there's a better business in recruitment.
Nice, nice. Last question then, which is all about the future you. So the future you has evolved from the younger you. It's all on the basis of understanding where you want to go, over communicating about that now to help you get to where you want to be. And maybe that contract piece, whether you knew it all the time or not, was challenging you to be more of a rounded leader. I would argue that's certainly the case. What does we every year in the business we talk about this year, so 2024 being the year of X, right? 2025, complete the sentence for me. 2025, the year of what for Brian Zinco, personally and professionally? What does that look like?
Think just the year of growth would probably be what I would put it down to. I think, work wise, I feel like, over the last 12 months, I've put myself in a position to really understand the contract market and really started to see success in the back end of it. So I think growing and really doubling down on what I learned in the past year will be significant. And that could be in revenue, could be leadership, taking on a larger team, and then just a larger overall responsibility within the group and brand. And then for myself, I don't know if it'll be 2025, but I'm really just starting to get interested in learning new skills or just new business practices. I mentioned it in one of the presentations I did yesterday, but eventually going for a part-time MBA, I think would be really cool. And this is not the next year or two, but would love to be part of like the deal team for a next event that we could end up doing down the line, and just understanding business from an overall macro perspective and diving a bit more into finance. I think, yes, will help me professionally, but just also in personal life or things that I didn't learn as a psych major. So yeah, I'm just constantly looking to push myself and grow in 2025.
Nice, nice. Signature question that we have at the end of all of these is one piece of advice you'd give a younger self.
Yeah. I think there's one that probably was the most impactful for me was when I just stopped comparing myself to others and compared myself to myself. I think, naturally in recruitment, there's going to be people who have hot starts. There's going to be people who don't have as hot starts. And it's really easy to look at others and see the success that they're having and start to doubt yourself. But, once you start to block all that out and then try to get 1% better every day in anything that you do, that's where you really start to see the magic, come through and happen, whether it's, your work, something you want to pursue outside of work. If you could just focus on that improvement day in and day out, you'll be massively successful.
Nice. Marginal gains like that.
Marginal gains.
We couldn't do this podcast. G would kill me if we didn't talk about some of the exciting opportunities that we have within Cypro across the New York business at the moment. So, you able to give us an elevated picture of what's on offer? What can people expect from joining Cypro in New York?
Yeah, I mean, we have a couple seats available. I think two pressing or senior hire within our clinical development group as well as our tech ops group. I think the opportunity is awesome, especially within our brand. We have a super solid leadership team across the board. We lead based on what's going to be good for the team as opposed to ourselves. And I think in turn, over the past year or so, I've really seen our culture take that next level step inside pro. Everyone gets on super well. Everyone supports each other. Like I mentioned earlier, that complete culture of LHI is really, really embodied by our Pro team. Another amazing part of our group is that everyone contributes. We have a high performing team across the board. I think, by the end of the year, everyone who's been here for the full year will do over 300K, which is amazing for a team of our size. So you'll be stepping into not just a high performing team, but a team that gets along really well. Plus, you're in the best market, and maybe I'll be a bit biased, but life sciences will always be there. Sure, there might be peaks and troughs, but life is ever changing. Medicine is always advancing, and there's always a need for new drugs and products in the market. So you have that stability piece, but life sciences is awesome. I couldn't recommend it more, and I think our group at Cypro is some of the best in the biz.
Nice. You should get a job in TA, mate. You did a better job of pitching it than I did. But well, thank you
Yeah,
very much,
the UPS
Zinco.
days taught me.
Well,
Had to be good at selling that.
well, thank you very much, mate. It's been really insightful, and certainly I've learned a few bits from hearing from you today, mate. So just wanted to say on behalf of everyone, thank you for everything you've done for us so far, and we look forward to the future of Brian Zinco and On New York Business. And for those that are listening, if you're interested in opportunities within Cypro in New York, feel free to reach out to Zinco directly, reach out to myself. As we referenced, we've got a couple of leadership positions there. And also, if I'm right in thinking, we're always open to speaking to senior contract talent too. So
Absolutely.
as always, feel free to like, comment, subscribe to this podcast. And yeah, I think Melissa's up next with another one over the pond in the UK and Europe. But absolute pleasure, mate. Keep being you. And I'll speak to you soon, all right?
Thanks for having me, Jimmy. Take care.
All the best, mate. Bye.